The topic for the panel discussion is how can schools contribute to employable skills of its students? And on this note, may I invite Rittika Chanda Parruck, who's Deputy Director, Education and Society, to chair this panel. And on the panel, we have Priti Ojha, Director cum Principal of Kanya Gurukul School, Kurukshetra, Arti, Headmistress of Delhi Public School, Aligarh, Moshumi Banerjee, Principal of Adamus World School, Kolkata, Chandeep Marwah. She has many feathers on her cap, so we just put it simply independent consultant, and so is Suman Chawla.
First of all, a very big welcome and thank you for coming from all the different places. We are very, very delighted to have you with us over here, particularly as Arijit mentioned, that this is the first, globally the first batch ever to run through the core skills workshop. And the reason for having, today is reflection. And we thought that we should begin reflecting by having a conversation once again to go back and visit the first point where we started as to why did we opt to do the core skills anyway, and what provokes us to reflect or review the reasons for revisiting how we teach in schools. Weren't we doing a good job to start with? Have we started to go wrong? Or why should we at all change? There's no need to fix a thing which is working, in a sense. So that's where we are. And I was really looking forward to seeing Arijit's presentation, which we hope will become all right. A question that, is there a need to address employability skills? Or do we need to make children employable in school, in the schools? Do schools need to address this issue at all? Or should we just carry on preparing students for the board exams and dealing with day-to-day troubles of growing up without bothering about the world outside? What do you feel? That is there a need? So can we ask Priti?
Thank you, Rittika. And welcome all of you. Good morning to all of you. And this is a very vital question which Rittika has come up with. We really need a lot of skills development in the children other than the academics. Because recently I have joined a school which has less of content from the books, especially like NCERT. And the children that we are catering are basically from the rural background. But when we analyzed through few of our teachers, that if we can see what exact skills do they have, because that's very important for them in the end of the day to get their bread and butter. Because that's the reason they are coming in that school in a residential place to study. Right. And when we see that the teacher is able to identify the right skill of that girl in those special 4 years, 9 to 12, we are able to focus on her employability. And when we tried it in our school, we found that food production, which does not need much of vocal and skills of communication, but more of skills of cooking, the girls were better to do their job.
Right. So
and then when we took them out to industry, like a hotel management, which is nearby in Kurukshetra, they could relate their skills, how it will help them to implement it in the real life. Right. And the best thing that I saw was that skill is not the only thing that we need to identify. We also need to promote the competency, which is very vital. For example, if the girl has a skill of cooking, how quickly can she do that cooking?
Right.
Can she manage with the limited resources?
True.
Can she do it with a speed which is the requirement of the client?
True.
Can she serve the community where she's going to do that cooking? For example, one of them last year was an Oberoi's in Delhi, recruited through our school. Now she is somewhere outside India, and she's an absolutely vegetarian girl. And she went into this management training. She was having the skill of cooking, but the competency in her to bring her an edge ahead of the rest was when she started knowing how to do things quickly with the ingredients that she has.
That's very interesting, Priti. Recently, Mrs. Rachna Pant from Ramjas School and I had the opportunity to participate in the Education Fast Forward debate, where one of our consultants, actually said that, yeah, skills is okay, competency is good, but behaviors are important as well. And he gave this example that if you get onto a plane, you have an air hostess who has the skills of making coffee, and bringing it up to your chair and your seat and giving it to you. But whether she smiles and gives it to you, whether she exchanges a few words of pleasantries, that makes the whole lot of difference to the coffee that she's serving. So, besides the skills and the competencies, do you think, maybe Moshami or somebody else can respond to say, how important do you think are behaviors in the workplace?
It's extremely important. Well, good morning, everybody. As we are carrying on with this, it is very important. We are talking about skills, we are talking about content, we are talking about delivery, knowledge, but we are seeing that there is a lot of intolerance which is growing. This needs to be addressed because somewhere values are eroding, maybe because of the structure of the society, nuclear families. Also, parents are having one child and they're giving everything. There's no delayed gratification. So the child does not know that if there is a no, how to react to it. This, I think, is a problem that all school teachers and school heads are facing all over. Also, we have to teach them stress tolerance because examination has its own stress. As you just said, that when somebody is actually offering, there is a work stress, but you need to be tolerant, you need to be equipped to manage that. And I think along with the skills that we are teaching them, we need to teach them how to behave well. And you need the adjustability, the sensitivity, which is slowly dying out among children. And also, there's no sharing. Everybody is so cocooned in their own thing. And this is reflecting when they are going out into the bigger world because they are unable to be a proper team member. And that is what they are looking at. You can just do things on your own. In fact, I had read somewhere that a brilliant student from IIT had got a fantastic job, but within 6 months he lost it because he could not work as a team. He was so, self-obsessed that he would just deliver only his part. So I think it's very important, and I don't know, this is just my experience which I can share, that the Duke of Edinburgh program, which was very much prevalent in UK and it's still there, in India we have it as IYP. I think if schools encourage that, it really helps children to, have all these skills, because there are 4 skills they need to learn, and the one which is adventure, where they have to go out and live in any condition, and from all backgrounds, I think that teaches a lot. So I think it's very important for children to know how to behave at the right place.
That's exactly, I also feel, as you do, Moshmi, one of the things is, when I used to teach, one of the programs that we introduced in our school was the Round Square program. I don't know if you've heard of it. But Khan, who was the person who initiated it, said that unless children felt really scared at some point of their life, a big fright is a big learning, which comes with adventure when you stand at the edge of a cliff. But we are more and more going towards a society which is worried about exposing children to anything. We are cocooning them, in a sense, from any kind of risk-taking, any kind of... so how do you think schools, maybe Suman or you could, Charu could sort of respond to that, is how do you think schools would be able to create a safe environment within which to take challenges? Do you think schools have this structure, or do you think the school structure is so inflexible that we can't break that structure of a classroom with 30 students ever to reach, to create a place where they really experience something different, new, something which is away from their normal day-to-day come-into class routine. Do you want to respond, Cheryl?
Chandeep.
Chandeep, sorry.
A very good morning to all of you. Chandeep this side, and I think Rittika has really given us a very good question to ponder on. And when we talk about the flexibility in the schools, I think this reminds me of my old days when I, maybe about a decades back, when I finished my education, the formal education, and I was stepping into the workforce, is when I realized that, how am I going to go through it? And slowly and steadily, the, jigsaw puzzle it was on its way and it started getting solved when I tried to connect the dots. When I say connect the dots, that was something I felt was missing into my curriculum. But when I started connecting those dots, I could see that there were 4 E's which were very important. The first thing, talking about the fundamental education, which I think is in place in every school. When we talk about the structures, it is very much in place. We need to talk about giving the students the exposure. When we talk about the exposure, it means we have to move beyond the 4 walls of the classroom and give them the kinds of exposure we can, which is going to give them a connect with the real world. If we have that kind of an exposure, and that is not difficult when we talk about having 30 students, because we, as Indians, we have to feel blessed with the large numbers we have, because we can't do much about it. So we might as well find out strategies on how to cope up with those large numbers, yet try to include that inflexibility, which could be managed very well if we bring about a paradigm shift in the pedagogies we have been using. If we say we are still going to believe in the old methodology of teaching where they have to be seated in a particular manner, then of course we are being very rigid. So we need to change, for example, the very little change of bringing about a change in the seating arrangement, which would allow us to give them that flexibility of movement. We are going to address all our learners, so we are giving them that movement in the classroom. We are bringing about a change in our classroom because we are actually moving from information scarcity to information overflow. So when I talk about that, that flexibility demands that, I have to be not a teacher on the stage, like a sage on the stage, but be by their side. So definitely it calls for a chance and gives me an opportunity to think, dear teachers, who is doing the talking most of the time in my classrooms? Is it TTT, the teacher talk time, or am I making an attempt to replace it with STT, that is student talk time, and which is not very difficult, as Rittika said, even when we have 30, or maybe I will even go to the extent of quoting the numbers in our classrooms in our Delhi schools to be 60. If we do that kind of classroom management by bringing about a change in our teaching strategies, the change in our sitting arrangement, the change in not just limiting ourselves to the textbook, giving them an exposure, the kinds of experiences, please allow them within your school curriculum, and I think many of our schools are doing it, giving them an experience with the workforce. At least give them the privilege of going and getting connected, with many schools are doing. I am a witness to that, and with a strong conviction I can say that in the school where my children are going to, they have introduced this concept in class 11th, where they are giving them an opportunity to be with the organization for the first 15 days, when they are about to start feeling that what is the stream I need to opt for, so that they get a kind of an exposure what is there. Last but not the least, I would want to emphasize on also telling them about excellence. I think that is one thing which the schools can do. Not doing things at the surface level, which I feel the youngsters, they know so much, but they are like not going up to the excellence level. We need to really understand who is our audience. For example, for a mother, children are the beneficiary. That child is the beneficiary. As teachers, our students are a beneficiary. So am I giving the best to my child? So that I want to give. If I start doing that, I am inculcating a value in my child that I need to understand in my workforce who is my beneficiary, and try to give that customer delight as Priti was mentioning to that extent, and I think Rittika also mentioned, when the air hostess comes to you, she's doing her work, but with a smile on that face will give you that customer delight. Your thing is being happening, but to give that wow experience is when the schools try to instill this feeling of excellence. I think these 4 E's really play a very important role.
So your E's are education, exposure,
experience, excellence, and last but not the least, which has really helped me in my career, is even going to the extent of entrepreneur. Tomorrow, if I find myself to be a misfit, so I think these 5 E's have really helped me, and they have been very significant and have been like an essence in the success of my career of the last 19 years.
That's true.
So which I really want to emphasize is that it was there. It is there in our structures. Only what we need to do is we really need to make a conscious attempt, are we in sync with the demands of our hiring authorities? As my partner Moshmi really explained to the extent that, the biggest IITians, they were the misfits. Because today's hiring authorities are not wanting people with excellent knowledge, but they don't want a soldier like acting, on its own, being just a soldier and being on your own self, but you have to be a team player. Yeah. So if we are addressing those skills, which I don't think so is talking about a lot of change, bringing about a radical change in the school.
I would say that, perhaps we need to, it's great that we do have a structure within which we change. But, that's something I'd probably like to ask the audience as well. And we'll kind of take questions if you would like us to think. Do you think that our school structures do allow, or should there be a breakdown where, where children, as you said, your child goes out and works in an organization for 15 days, but he's doing it at class 11. Should we be sending out our children while they're still younger to different places? Or, Suman, what is your take on it? Do you think that the structures are there? What are the biggest challenges or barriers that schools face, do you think?
Barriers, I would say the biggest barrier is mindset. Barring a few schools in metros, when we travel to other places and even tell them to, adapt activities in schools, the teacher or the principal says, the parents will come and question us. Why are you doing these activities? How are the activities going to translate into marks? So that is another thing we need to keep in mind as educators, that we need to orient and take the other stakeholders with us, like the parents. And we need to convince them with the larger global picture that is staring at us. According to some of the statistics, 69% of the world's population will be living in cities by 2050. And 600 million jobs will need to be created within the next 10 years if we are to accommodate all the children who are growing up and for the workforce. And again, about what Chandeep said, just to quote some statistics, there are so many positions, but the employers are not able to fill them up because they can't find people with the right kind of skills. And this is a worldwide phenomena, not just related to India, confined to India. But we are amongst the highest, just behind China. China has 74% positions which the employers are not able to fill with people with the right skills, and India closely follows at 73. I think just like the population, we're just behind them. So as schools, we need to examine and break these structures if required to accommodate children to learn the skills. Like recently, again, going back to Times of India, I think that seems to be the paper of the day.
Theme of the day yesterday.
Yeah. On 3rd Feb, there was an article which caught my eye because we've been talking so much about skills and employability. There was a conclave that was held in Gurgaon with 50 schools participating, where they feel employability needs to be taught as a skill. And again, it was an open-ended kind of thing because even the educators there have invited suggestions.
Right.
So this is something we all need to ponder together and come up with things. As you rightly said, we are pioneers here. Yeah. So we need to break more paths and create new avenues and options for our children.
I mean, I personally feel that one of the reasons why we are scared of teaching skills or we are unable to, focus on the employabilities because we can't measure some of these core skills. And as a teaching institution, we are very worried about anything we cannot measure. If we can't say X has got more collaboration skills than Y, we are really worried, or we are not able to quantify the skills that we teach. But do you think that there could be a way, Arti, of quantifying? Is there a way of measuring? Have you tried to do that in your skills or competencies? Do you think that we could devise ways of measuring it?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Well, before I would come to your question, I would just like to have, a little comment on your previous question, because I feel, since I lead the junior wing, so school is the only place where we can inculcate employable skill, because by the time they reach to higher education in university or in colleges, that's the time to reflect their learning, and then they start facing the loss or the profit of their learning. So that's the place we actually have to shape them, mold them as per the future requirements. As far as measuring skill, there cannot be a fixed parameters where we can put them on test and then find out the result. But of course, the measurement could be felt in their overall change in approach. The few points which are really threatening in the holistic development, as per my opinion, patience. We do not have patience to wait for our turn. We do not have patience to try again. We do not have patience to listen to others. We do not have patience to let others speak. It involves several aspects of our daily life. Then we also have very, very least attitude of accepting the diversity. What we think right is right, and we do not think with the connotation of others' cultural background and thinking. So when we are trying to inculcate, or we are trying to bring these skills, very simple, like 2 days back, you must have all seen this movie, Airlift, and there was a problem when Indians were stranded, and most of the Indians did not have their passport with them because it was with the agent. Most of us, when we are trying to have a small jobs abroad, we go through all, different agents, not through the valid resources which are legal. So who are going to tell them that this is not the way? There are various resources through which you can always go to, and they are safe and secure.
Yes. So the ethics are
we are not taught. Behavior we are not taught. And so these are the fronts, these are the areas we basically fail in.
Yeah. So I think in the introductory sessions of the core skill, one of the things that was repeatedly said was the achievement gap. And the other thing that was said was that, recently, the new national policy on education is supposed to be framed and coming about shortly. And one of the areas within the new policy on education on which I happen to be a part of that team was looking at, should we be doing education? Should we be teaching ethics? Because if you come to measurement, that becomes a harder and harder thing to measure, and a more vaguer in its, people don't even consider it to be, a subject to be taught in schools. Should schools be worried in, we have this thing about sanskar, and we believe that if you have it or you don't have it, where it comes from, we don't know, and nobody, so you just blame somebody you cannot find around you, if a person is not doing the right thing, it seems to be something that's just within the person, and nobody, not the society, nobody else can be blamed for it. But I think somewhere we have to stand up as educational organizations and take the ownership of not having embedded that in people, in a sense.
Yeah,
well, in that national...
may I just add one thing?
Yes,
just to your point that, sanskar and all, what I have experienced in my teaching life, that the way we are treated, we deliver the same behavior to our students.
Yeah, we do that.
We are taught in a very strict, disciplined environment where we were not allowed to question. So sometime when the children who know how to question threaten the teachers. So this mindset Suman was talking about, we need to decondition ourselves from. And secondly is like, if you have that measurement, I'll just add one thing, that if you are focusing on measuring the skills, that was one point, because I can see lots of senior principals sitting here. When CCE was launched, basically it was to measure the process of the work, not the ultimate finished product. But somewhere it got lost, and we again came back, we were left with lots of documents to fill in. So that was, according to me, was the core issue. And when we start measuring these processes of happening in the classroom, I think that's the measurement of skill.
That's true. I mean,
Ma'am, can
what
I just...
do we do?
Yeah, when we were talking about barriers, I think one of the strongest, I don't know if people will agree, is the teacher training.
That's true.
What we find, from Calcutta, I can say, the people who are coming for teaching job are the ones who don't get a job elsewhere. So they just come and join, they do a Montessori or a TTC, and then after 2 years, they do the B.Ed from IGNU. So I think that somewhere that is a big challenge. We as heads, or, we have it in our head that this is the way, but who's going to implement it? So that is a big challenge, that the teacher community who's going to actually, embed all this needs to be trained, and this, and with the parent community, which is very much there abroad, that, the parent community is very much in sync with the teaching community. So whatever is being done is being discussed, so the challenges are less. So I just thought of bringing this point.
Yes,
I would just like to add one thing to what Rittika said, that, measurement of these skills. We are all talking about, and I think in the school structures, we cannot do away with measurements. So again, we are now trying to focus, and if we have some rubrics in place for the measurement of these 21st century skills, and we do have those on different online courses, and there's a beautiful course which has come up by the name of 21st Century Learning Design. And there they are actually giving the rubrics on how to measure this on a scale of 1 to 5. That is, for example, schools are just talking about collaboration, but to actually see whether that particular activity is really collaborative in nature. It doesn't mean that you're just two of you getting together, only one student is working and the work is done. Because in many cases, when we talk about group work, these kind of things can happen. Only few of them are working. So do we have the parameters in place to assess whether in true sense it was a teamwork or no? We're talking about problem solving. Do we have those parameters in place on a scale of 1 to 5, giving us an indication that this was in a true sense a problem solving approach, this activity? So I think that is again coming up.
I think that there are, if you look around, there are lots of rubrics and lots of measures available. But the issue that has been, why I asked this question is because this is something that British Council's, project of the year for 16-17 is looking at how can we, measure as objectively as possible a very, so-called nebulous area. And one of the things that, one of our challenges has been actually not that we don't know what a collaboration looks like, we probably do, but that we don't have a critical mass of people who can go into a classroom, look at a bunch of students and identify it and have the same measurement for it, So our descriptors are not tight enough to allow us to identify, what collaboration looks like, what is the visible aspect of collaboration, and then have it so tightly, defined so that whether you, me, or a third person goes into the classroom sees exactly the same thing. So that moderation aspect is actually one that we have, challenges with, but we are trying to address. So I think that's going to be the next big experiment that you all will be sort of drawn into participating with, in the sense. So that's going to be one of the interesting ones that I did want to share with all of you. But I think at this point, if there's any questions from the audience, I'm really happy to sort of put it to the panel.
Rittika, there's something that I would like to, add on here, not a question, but, there was something known as moral science.
Yes.
That all the Catholic schools did, once upon a time. Then came in value education. Even the CBSE and the NCRT, they drew out a curriculum on value education. So when you talk about moral science, it was a science. It was what you should be doing and what is the direct outcome of what you are doing. So I think these schools need to go back to that, and they need to take out a little time for the transaction of this particular subject or curriculum also, I would say. Content can be any. That can be, decided by the schools or by anybody at a central this thing. But the transaction of that has to be brought into the curriculum. True. So somewhere CBSE did try by getting the value-based questions in classes 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, that they were trying to ask a question and they were trying to find out the embedded value into it.
True.
So through the curriculums that we transact, in our daily school lives, I think that should be now embedded.
Very, very true.
Very, very consciously.
Yeah.
I think I strongly feel children learn by observation. They don't listen. So as a teacher myself, I have had children coming up to me. In the moral science paper, there was a question, whether you like sharing your tiffin. And the child came up to me and asked me that, ma'am, should I write the truth? Because I said, what is your answer? And the child said, my answer is no. But they expect me to write yes.
True.
So you see, when we talk about moral science also, then our behavior should match what we speak.
I agree.
That's very important.
Yes.
When our behaviors don't match, there's a big confusion. So when I asked the child later that why did you ask me this question? Why you don't share your tiffin? He says, she came from a background where her parents were doctors. If the children around me, they lick their finger, why should I let them put their finger in my tiffin? So she had a very valid point. So we need to think.
No, I completely agree. But the point is, I think what is important here is that we make space for that discussion. And I think, I come from a residential school background. I taught for 6 years in a residential school. And in a residential school, children don't have the luxury of having parents to go back to. And their teachers are loco-parentis, so to speak. And the pastoral care elements are a huge part of the debate. And I taught in a girls' residential school. And one of the questions children asked me is, they were girls from conservative backgrounds, and they said, if we got married and we got married into a family where our husbands were taking bribes, our father-in-laws were engaged in, not so nice activities, would you expect me to divorce? Or would you expect me to stand up and protest? And some of these questions are really hard to answer. When you stand there, they really stump you in a sense, and you look at the child, look into her eyes and think, really, what do I have a moral high ground over here, in a sense, because she's so helpless in the scheme of things and is asking me a valid question in that point. And it has got a lot of implications, in the way you answer. So the load of carrying on moral education is really very, very heavy in that sense, So yeah, it's right. Anybody else would like to? Yes, there's Anindita? Yeah. This right at the back. Yeah, Arijit is there with you. Yes, okay. Yeah.
Hi, say about 5 years back, I got involved in a project with Howard Gardner, and the project was the Good Work project. And he's been working on this project, and it talks about, so we've been talking about moral values, and I believe there need to be amalgamation and very intricate balance between ethics, which is what he talked about. He said that at school level, there are 3 E's. Now, we were talking about E's, it just struck me.
Yeah,
so he
okay.
said there are 3
Times
E's.
of India is the theme of the day today.
Yeah, he said ethics, excellence, and engagement. So he largely talked about he was talking about students in US, and the project which we worked on, it largely talked about students getting those 21st century skills in terms of not only ethics, obviously excellence is as much importance, and engagement is something that he really stressed upon. So while we are talking about ethics, I think one really needs to keep in mind that excellence and skills, and it has to be a mix
around,
of
yes,
everything if we are to produce the 21st century learners.
Somebody, Arijit?
Good morning, all of you. I just wanted to know that because I'm looking after these circulars in my schools, CBSE circulars, and generally I see that there are so many vocational subjects are there, but we are not starting those subjects in our schools.
True.
Because of, you can say, teachers are not there, and it's really difficult for schools to start. I just want to know your view, ma'am.
I would say that, the British Council, in my new role, I've just taken over as Deputy Director Education. And as you know that today onwards, Arijit heads the schools program. So this is perhaps, my engagement in the schools is likely to become less. But my engagement in the skills and vocational education sector, which is a part of the British Council's other arm of work is very, it's very interesting. But one of the biggest problem of the skills sector is that one thing you don't want to do is skill people for a job that may not be out there. So you're always second guessing, And there's a classic example is to expect people to make, stitch and sew and expect that we have lots of tailoring jobs out there. So whenever vocational training subjects are a little tricky in introduction, because unless you can demonstrate that they have a career path beyond it, in a sense. So that's where it's kind of held back a little bit. Where it's working well, I can share with you where it works well. It works well, for example, from my experience, in Tamil Nadu, they have a whole set of textile industries around a cluster of government schools, and that industry has actually put in the workshops in schools, and children take it as a vocational subject. They do textile designing, textile machinery, as a part of their vocational skills, with a guarantee that when they finish their 12th, they are absorbed into the industry immediately. And it is very, very critically important for those skills. And the industry has put it in those schools because they need the workforce. It's working in Haryana, where they have brought in specific, particularly auto-related skills. So the Automotive, Sector Skills Council. And CBSEs, or the traditional, there has to be an equivalence in the vocational training, in the academic line of thing, and in the technical education. And we don't have that. So our UGC does not talk to our, the vocation councils. They don't talk to sector skill councils. The UGC does not talk with schools, So, and they're spread over many ministries. So the whole landscape is so extremely complicated that good intention exists, but good execution is very hard to find. So I agree with you that there are many of these skills that are taught, but whether we can implement them is, again, subject to many forces in that sense.
Actually, I generally see that everybody wants to be in his or her comfort zone, basically, comfort zone. That's the main problem. They don't want to come out Because
would say that.
if we have to, traditional methods are there, traditional teachings are there, traditional subjects are there, but vocational subjects are very rare. That's the main.
Yes, they aren't able to clearly see. You're right. They're looking for that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning to everyone. I just wanted to add up over here, even if we bring out the vocational courses in our school, arranging for the teachers, there is a big, roadblock which comes from the parent.
True.
To make a parent understand that if the child is going to take up this vocational skill, like we have identified library sciences. This is one vocational course which is available at class 11th. And we wanted to bring it in. There were no takers. The parents are not ready. They don't know about it. So this is one area. But if we look at the other skill that we can develop, one of the things that we have identified in our school, and we have been doing it, like content writing.
True.
We have a class magazine. I think most of the schools must be working on it. School magazines, the students are writing in it over here. What are we doing? We are inculcating, we are developing a skill of writing, communicating articles, which has been there. We involve students when they stand up and they conduct a program, which skill we are imparting. So these are different things which can be translated into employment.
Yeah.
But the need is that when we are doing it, we have to identify, as we say, we have to identify that skill. One of the panelists has just mentioned it. Identify that skill in that child and develop that competency to that level that when the child goes out, can take it up. Like photography, there are photography clubs, there are different clubs which are there in the school. So little measures, if we can do that in our school, I think we can inculcate it.
True.
But the big question is how to measure it up and how to take it forward.
Yeah.
I would like to have it from how to measure those skills, how to develop those rubrics, because we are not trained into it.
True.
But we need that kind of a training.
Yeah. We'll just take another question in front from the lady, and then probably we'll ask for a response. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share with everyone, when it comes to teaching ethics to the students on the moral values or moral education to the students, instead of teaching moral values, what we do at our school is we practice morals, we practice thoughts, we practice ethics. Like we have an overdose of values given to our students in the form of compassion, sharing their food with the didis and bhaiyas. Then we have a Friday collection where every student is made to contribute a small amount of money to a maximum limit which has been decided upon. And my school faces the challenge because we are in an area which is a very rowdy and notorious place. And the type of students who come to the school, most of the schools are juggling with the problem of indiscipline. And believe me, when we practice the thought, when we practice the moral values instead of teaching it, there's a huge lot of difference in the entire environment of the school. And most of the time when we get parents who come seeking admission, the reason they state for transforming or transferring their child from a branded school to my school is that, ma'am, there are no indiscipline problems in your school as our children are facing in the schools which hold big brands or big names. And I think somewhere that is because the entire environment of the school is such that children are made to practice the thought instead of made to say the thought in the assembly or made to learn the thought by heart. So that is one such experiment which we have been successful with.
To first answer the question for the lady who was in the last table, you said that the skills measurement and evaluation is something very important, and that's what is stopping us from making us the real teacher to so-called to the parents. I feel that there are so many activities that we have in school which are called as activities which we do every month, which basically let us know that what is that one skill that that child has. You don't have to every time measure the skill. You have to observe the skill of a huge parameter which every teacher has in her when she sees a child speaking fluently on a stage. So she has that communication power. She can go in a mass media. She can actually excel herself in various other opportunities. And then if you identify through these smaller activities that you have in the classroom, or maybe house-wise and whatever ways that we have in our school, you can observe them and identify a group and orient, special orientation to those children, especially through a counselor, a career counselor who basically tells and orients the child what is real and what's real, so that he becomes rational of what he's trying to achieve. Once you let the child know the steps of where that child has to reach, then there is an orientation of the child to the parent directly. You may not be a key in between as a principal or as a teacher, but the child will orient the parent very clearly that this is what I want, because this is what I've actually seen. And then the skill that you actually wanted to identify comes into real picture. And then you bring them into a training or whatever vocational trainings that we are talking about through a college or an institution. Then they have rubrics in line to actually do the further work. We cannot reach everywhere. We need to actually identify what is very important as a seed and give them a space to grow and let go where they can.
So thank you very much for this. I think that precisely might now work. So what Arijit has is much, much more interesting. I know I can see hands going up, okay? But what I'm going to, because we are really constrained by time, and I have been told off for being a little over the thing. But you can tweet your questions. So Arijit says, and we'll respond. And the thing that I wanted to just, in the wrap up say that it was a very fruitful discussion, because what it did in my head is to set a scope for where schools can contribute to employability. Definitely my feeling at the end of discussion with you and with the input from the audience is that it's a little difficult to go into sector-specific skills development within schools, because I was worried about the library science thing, because libraries are not future-proofed. We are going to lose libraries soon. In a sense, we already downsizing libraries in the British Council, which is one of the big library institutions. It's very difficult to say which specific sector will give your children employment. But there's a whole world of work to be done around generic employability skills like communication, collaboration, core skills. So it kind of is a reiteration of faith for me in a sense. And thank you very much for engaging in that discussion. I know that there's lots to be said, and we could have this discussion the whole day, but I think there's a formal structure to the peer reviews that will happen later on, and I think it's going to really contribute to all our learning as we go along. So thank you very much.